Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me? Good afternoon. So I'm going to welcome. Thank you. I'm going to welcome Ambassador Michael Imran Kanu, permanent representative of Sierra Leone to the United Nations, and the political coordinator, Mr. Alan George. Thank you. Good afternoon, all, and a very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Sonia Karim, and I am the Deputy Political Coordinator for the Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone to the UN. Most of you know our spokesperson, Nikki Spencer-Coker, who is absent today unavoidably. So I get the pleasure of stepping in for her. But please continue to reach out to Nikki, not me. She will be back by the end of the week, so please continue to reach out to Nikki. Before handing over to Ambassador Kanu and President of the United Nations Security Council for this month, I would like to remind all those who will ask questions to kindly introduce yourselves and identify your media organization. Without further ado, I now have the honor to cede the floor to Ambassador Kanu. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Political Coordinator, Ms. Sonia Karim. Good afternoon, members of the press. I join our Deputy Political Coordinator in welcoming you to this press briefing. As President of the United Nations Security Council for November 2025, I have the honor to present the Council's program of work for the month, which has been adopted this morning. I am joined at the table by our Political Coordinator, Mr. Alan George, and as DPC said, our spokesperson, who you know very well, Ms. Onike Spencer-Coker, is away for a statutory meeting, but she and the political coordination team will be available to you throughout the month for any relevant information. Now, before turning to the program, allow me to make a brief remark in my national capacity. Dear colleagues, members of the press, during our presidency, Sierra Leone will advance a forward-looking peace and security agenda, building on the reflective approach of our August 2024 presidency and our sustained agenda setting focused on Africa throughout our tenure. The second presidency in the current term, our fourth across our two tenures, concentrates on four interlinked challenges that most decisively shapes today's and tomorrow's security landscape: conflict-related food insecurity, climate-related security risk, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, and the inclusion of young people in peace and security decision-making through the institutionalization of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda as endorsed in the Pact for the Future. Before turning to the program highlight, a brief word on working methods. Our presidency will uphold transparency, inclusivity, and efficiency, working to build consensus and in close consultations with all council members. As you note, we came exactly at 1 p.m. In line with our steadfast commitment to the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, we will ensure the inclusion of gender perspectives and representation in our meetings as appropriate. We will promote civil society participation, and where appropriate, and I think you will like this, we will propose press elements following close consultations. Throughout the month, we will adhere to the Council's established practices and the highest standard of diplomacy and cooperation. Sierra Leone's presidency is anchored by two signature events, two key briefings on the situation in the Sahel, as well as climate security risk reflecting our priorities. In addition, we have included the mandated open debate on working methods, all of these meetings setting the month's ambitious agenda. One of the signature events is a mandated meeting that we have elevated to an open debate in light of its significance. On 6th November, we'll have a thematic briefing on climate and security, environmental impact of armed conflict-driven security risk. The discussion aims to elevate the security implications of conflict-linked environmental harm caused by armed conflict and the practical measures the Council and UN system can advance to mitigate such risk. Our Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Madam Frances Peggy Algali, is expected to preside. Briefers will include UNEP Executive Director, Under Secretary General Inga Anderson, and Professor Charles Jallow of the University of Miami, as well as member and special rapporteur of the International Law Commission. On 10th November, we'll convene an open debate on small arms and light weapons, to be chaired by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Alhaji Musa Timothy Kaba, drawing on the Secretary General's biannual report and focusing on the nexus between illicit flows, transnational crime, and terrorism, as well as their destabilizing effect, particularly across Africa and the Caribbean regions. Office of Disarmament Affairs, Officer in Charge and Deputy to the High Representative, Adedeji Ibo, will be one of the briefers, and we also expect the African Union's High Representative for Silence in the Gun, His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Ibn Chambers, to brief the Council. On 14th November, a working methods debate will take place, taking stock of the implementation of Note 507, in addition to issues of promoting greater transparency, inclusivity, and efficiency, including more equitable pen holdership and broader participation of non-council members. We expect focus to also be on the selection process of the next Secretary General. Working methods constitute one of the clusters in the intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform in the General Assembly. You will recall that in our last August 2024 presidency, we convened a historic first debate on the structural reform of the Council, focused on addressing the historical injustice against Africa. We see the meeting on working methods as a continuation of that important priority work for Africa. Colleagues, our principal signature event follows on 17th November, a high-level open debate on conflict-related food insecurity, framing the global dialogue, addressing food insecurity as a driver of conflict, and ensuring food security. Guided by international humanitarian law and peace-building initiatives, the high-level open debate will treat food insecurity as both a driver and consequence of conflict. The open debate will also underline the absolute prohibition of starvation as a method of warfare and promote coherent action across humanitarian development peace nexus to build resilience, accelerate agricultural recovery, and advance accountability. I am very delighted and pleased to inform that we're expecting His Excellency Dr. Julius Madabio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, to preside. His Excellency will be accompanied by the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Dr. Henry Mustapaka. The Deputy Secretary General, Excellency Amina J. Mohamed, will brief the Council, as well as Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, and Dr. Ibrahim Asen Mayaki, AU Special Envoy for Food Systems. As food security is also a focus of our National Development Agenda, our flagship program, Feed Salon, we will convene a lunchtime roundtable on food security on the same day as a side event. On 18th November, we'll convene a briefing on peace consolidation in West Africa, spotlighting counterterrorism cooperation and calling for sustained international attention and border sharing consistent with our collective security framework. Terrorism in the Sahel is not a responsibility for West Africa or Africa alone. His Excellency President Bio is expected to preside, with the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, ECOWAS Commissioner President Dr. Omar Al-Yuture, expected to brief the Council. We further expect participation by the most affected states at high level. Finally, in our national capacity, Sierra Leone and Guyana intend to table a draft resolution on youth peace and security to close institutional gaps, including by establishing an informal expert group and instituting an annual council debate on YPS. The negotiations are ongoing, they are constructive, and it's really a great honor to work with A3+ member Guyana on this important resolution. If adopted, it will be 10 years after the first and landmark YPS resolution 2250 was adopted. Now, as President of the Council, let me go through the country-specific situations. Moving through to the specific program highlight for the month, country-specific situations are all mandated. On 4th November in the afternoon, there is a UNESFA TCC meeting on Abia. DPPA ASG Matapobe is expected to brief in the meeting. On 5th November, it features a 2140 committee, that's Yemen, briefing, in which Ambassador Sanjin Kim of Republic of Korea will brief, followed by UNISFA, Sudan, South Sudan briefing and consultations, as well as ASB, Probe, and Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, Juan Song, are expected to brief. On 11th November, we take up UNMISS, that's the UN mission in South Sudan, with a briefing and consultations, and DPO USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix is expected to brief. On 13th November, an adoption on 2140, that's the Yemen Committee, Sanctions Committee. It will proceed the Middle East Yemen briefing and consultations. We continue on 19th November with briefing and consultations on Syria, political humanitarian. 20th November with Lebanon 1701 consultations. 24th November with Middle East briefing and consultations. 25th November with the ICC Libya in the morning and in the afternoon, and we envisage adoption on Libya Maritime Authorization, that's Security Council Resolution 2292, and consultations on 1718, that is the DPRK. In terms of thematic issues, adoption and other issues, there will be a joint briefing of the counterterrorism committees, 1267, 1989, and 2253, as well as 1373 and 1540 in the afternoon of 19th November. We anticipate mandate renewals adoptions for MINUSCA, UNISFA on 13th November. The month also includes the International Court of Justice election on 12th November, in concurrent sessions of the General Assembly and the Council to fill the one current vacancy. Council members are expected to participate in the Finnish workshop on 6th and 7th November, hitting the ground running, a useful platform that brings together current members of the Council and incoming members to discuss informally on important aspects of the Council's work. We intend to hold our wrap-up activities on 26th November, ahead of the UN official holidays on the 27th November. To say that it will be a very busy month would be an understatement. Sierra Leone, however, looks forward to a productive month and appreciates the continued cooperation and engagement of all members in maintaining international peace and security. And certainly as President, I'll be guided by the decisions of the Council during the month. Let me use this opportunity to express sincere gratitude for the unwavering support of the Secretariat, particularly SCAD, and certainly my thanks to my mission staff for all their dedicated hard work. And to the most important part, I'm happy to take the questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kanu. Thank you. We'll get the first question from the representative of the United Nations Correspondents Association, please. Thank you.
RT News, and on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you very much for your briefing today. My question, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with climate, something that you mentioned towards the beginning of your remarks a few times. In your national capacity, as a country that's clearly concerned about the impact of climate change on your own country, can you give us your assessment of the impact of the US's change in policy on climate this year, in particular the withdrawal from the Paris agreements and the rollback on climate policies? What impact is that having on your country and globally? Thanks.
Thank you so much, and if I may, Yvonne, and my thanks to the United Nations Correspondents Association for the very best wishes. You've asked an important question which I can only answer in my national capacity. Now, Sierra Leone was very purposeful in including the climate security thematic briefing. We just come from Addis Ababa, where the Security Council met with the African Union Peace and Security Council. And one of the important priorities which the AUPSC cited, basically climate security. It is an important issue for the African continent. And as you've mentioned, not only in Sierra Leone, but we have 32 coastal countries, coastal states in Africa. And we've seen the worst of climate disasters in Southern Africa, in Mozambique previously, famine and other climate-related insecurity, whether it's in East Africa or you're looking at the Lake Chad Basin, the loss of water. So it's an important issue to Africa. Now, in terms of our briefing, we focused the discussion, and let me just deal with that and then I'll answer specifically the impact of U.S. policy. Because, of course, we have the mandate argument that the Security Council should focus on peace and security issues. So our briefing on climate security will focus on the impact of armed conflict on the environment. That is a core Security Council issue. And that issue is not discussed anywhere else. In the COP in Brazil, in Belém, the focus will be on the political and developmental aspect. The International Court of Justice, the International Tribunal of Law of Sea have weighed in on the legal implications of climate change. So we think where we have a council that deals with peace and security, then the impact of armed conflict should be dealt with in the council because they are related. But of course, there are other issues of peace and security that also would inform council's discussions. Broader scale withdrawal by the U.S. In terms of climate commitment. We think what underlines everything, at least from a developing country perspective, is the common but differentiated responsibility. Most of the countries that do suffer from the adverse effect of climate change are now responsible for the situation that we face. I think the International Court of Justice has been very clear on the legal consequences and the implications, and of course, the obligations of states, not only on the basis of treaty law, which is the Paris Agreement, but also customary international law. So a country may withdraw from a treaty like the Paris Agreement, but they are also obligated under applicable customary international law. So we think there's still obligations, particularly on the principles of common but differentiated responsibility. Those states that have withdrawn from the Paris Agreement are still obligated to make good their responsibility in terms of climate change. So whether it's development, security, or other aspects, including mitigation and adaptation, which is important for small countries like Sierra Leone, coastal, but also small island developing states. So it is an important issue, and in the briefing, we'll be highlighting one specific aspect that moves from our example in Sierra Leone was loss of biodiversity. We lost our wildlife, they're only coming back, to other areas where it could be reconstruction and things of the sort. So I think it's an important conversation. Loss of agricultural land, it's an important conversation to have in the Security Council. Thank you.
We have a question in the third row, and then we'll come to
Thank you. Namo Abdullah with Rudao Media Network. Congratulations on your on chairing the Security Council. On October 31st, you voted in favor of the UN Security Council resolution endorsing Morocco's autonomy plan for Western Sahara. Given your country's commitment to decolonization and self-determination, how does your vote align with that principle, the principle of self-determination for the Sahrawi people? Thank you.
Thank you. I thought we were dealing with the program of work for November, but I will answer in my national capacity, certainly. We explain our vote. The vote on the resolution addressed two significant points. The first point was to renew the mandate of MINUSO, which we said was a stabilizing force in the region, and it's needed at this time. And I think the Council supported the fact that it was renewed for 1 year. Of course, the second part of the resolution was to deal with gaining momentum and taking advantage of this important support by the international community for the Moroccan Autonomy Initiative. I think it's clear when we deal with the issue of self-determination and decolonization, we have to understand it. Of course, it's a principle of international law. It's a jus cogens norm. And then we have the fourth committee, which has been assigned to deal with this issue in the GA. It has been very clear in the fourth committee that you deal with decolonization and its 17 non-self-governing territories on a case-by-case basis. So how you deal with Western Sahara has to be different from the other 16. And in Western Sahara, an initiative has been submitted, which is supported by majority of member states. It falls within the principle of self-determination, and so we're confident that it falls within the confines of international law and the UN Charter. And in the resolution, it says it's a basis for negotiations, so we support the political process. We hope that the parties could take advantage of this and engage meaningfully so that after 50 years of the continuation of this impasse, there could be a resolution of the issue relating to Western Sahara.
We have a question from the front.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for the briefing. It's Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. There doesn't seem to be on the month Iran or non-proliferation, and given the fact that 2231, the JCPOA expired only a few weeks ago, it would be interesting, and maybe you're waiting for a Security Council member to ask for it, but is that do you see it as playing a part? And also on Ukraine, which is not on the agenda. So I just was interested to know if you plan to add those or what. And certainly not on Thanksgiving.
I will second that. That I can answer in the capacity as president because we only have country-specific situations that are mandated. So those are the ones we have in the program. And in terms of the two issues, at least one in the meeting today, the PR's meeting, there were indications that there will be requests. So as president of the council, it is our responsibility to ensure that we're able to convene meetings as requested by. I don't think it's best for me to say so, but of course there were the expression of interest to convene call a meeting on Ukraine.
Thank you. So, question from the third row
Me?
center. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Sir, you came from Africa, which was under colonization and oppression by foreign domination and colonization. Now, Palestine is still under colonization. It is the most visible example of oppression by foreign powers. Why the Palestinians don't have the right to resist foreign domination, foreign colonizers, and oppression, similar to every part in the world that who fought colonialism? Now, that's one issue. And the second, do you support this idea of stabilization force in Gaza? How do you see the role of Palestinians in Gaza? There are some ideas to bring foreign nationals to rule Gaza as if the Palestinians are, and they're not qualified. Palestine, and I have another question I will ask later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I forgot to acknowledge Pamela and I think Abduli and of course Abdul Hamid. Thank you for your question. I think firstly, as president of the council, I should say that a meeting will be convened on Middle East that will deal with Palestine on the 24th. And we'll be having this meeting after the important ceasefire deal that was reached two indirect negotiations between the government of Israel and Hamas. Of course, from time to time, we've seen violations of the ceasefire. But so we think that the meeting on the 24th will be important. Now, in my national capacity, let me address some of the other points which you've raised in terms of the right to self-determination. So that's how I will characterize it. Indeed, of course, the people of Palestine do have the inalienable right to self-determination. That is clear, that is international law. Even the International Court of Justice reinforced that. And of course, I've asked both the Security Council and the General Assembly to operationalize that right. So that is the context in which we operate. Now, most African countries actualize independence and self-determination in various forms. We negotiated in Sierra Leone, but of course in other areas there were resistance. And we will not offer a value judgment. But what I can say is that, of course, the path to peace and the two-state solution is essentially the negotiations which has been agreed. The hope is that we'll continue to support the peace process, because on the issue of international law, on whatever it is that have occurred in Gaza, we know where we stand. Of course, ask for accountability, ask that we have negotiations that will lead to peace. The hostages have been free. We continue to see that the exchange of diseased hostages and prisoners. And so that good faith should continue. In terms of the stabilization force, what I would say is that we'll support the agreement. Because if the agreement contains the two parties coming together to say that you need a stabilization force, that is what we have to support. And it doesn't mean that when we operationalize that, we do not discuss what will be the parameters and the element. There could be different forces. People are talking about whether it's going to be peacekeeping, peace enforcement, and contribution, and it should be blessed by the Security Council. To the last part of your question, we've said it in the chamber that there cannot be any talk and decision about Palestine without the involvement of Palestinian people. So that is a point which we also support robustly. So there are different elements to your question, but firstly, the principle of self-determination of the people of Palestine is sacrosanct. Of course, we have to support the peace process because that's the path to the two-state solution, and certainly there should be no decision about Palestine without Palestinians.
Can I have a follow-up, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, the follow-up is it's related. The West Bank now, it's almost 80% of its land are either controlled by the army or by the settlers. The violence of the settlers is going all-time high. Every single day there is an attack. Today they killed someone, the settlers in Hebron. 2 children were killed this week, etc. In fact, there is no land left for what is called two-state solution. The Security Council keep repeating that, two-state solution, two-state solution. Where is this Palestinian state would be established if those settlers are expanding now and they taking over a new land and they accelerating their violence against the Palestinians? So why the Security Council doesn't have this special meeting to address the issue of the settler violence? Thank you.
Thank you again. I think that's an important question which should come in the discussions on the briefing on the 24th, because usually the briefing covers both the West Bank and Gaza and elsewhere in the Middle East. Again, in the national capacity, if the path to peace and security is a two-state solution, then the two-state solution should not be made impossible. And I think that's the most critical point. And there has to be a need for continuing pressure, clarity in terms of, the status of the West Bank. And the pressure should be those who are in a position to ensure that there is due compliance, continue to pressure the government of Israel to ensure that the two-state solution is not made impossible. But in terms of the legality, it cannot be made impossible, but it's the physical changes and, of course, the continued expansion of settlement that may make the contiguity of both the West Bank and Gaza almost impossible.
We'll take the front of the center, please, and then.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. 2 questions on the program of work. Number 1, did I hear you correctly when you said that you were going to provide notes after closed consultations to the media? And if so, can you give us more details on that? And the second question is on November 14th. You mentioned in your remarks that you expected some discussion to come up on the selection of the next Secretary General. As you know, the first formal step of that is the President of the Security Council to send a joint letter with the President of the General Assembly to transmit that letter before the end of the year. That seems like a good date for that to happen. Do you expect that letter to be transmitted on that date, or can you give us a little more detail specifically about the Secretary General and that date of the 14th? Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. To the first question, yes, we would promote and advance the idea of where there is a close consultation, particularly when there are no open briefings, that the Council can agree on press elements. And of course, if it's agreed, the President will go out and read it in the stakeout area. We haven't had those for a while, given the climate and dynamics in the Council, and we will try to promote that as part of our transparency initiative. On November 14th, when we have the working methods debate, certainly the more traditional issues relating to working methods will be discussed: transparency, inclusivity, penholdership. But the selection of the next Secretary General is one big issue which we believe the member state will focus on. We have a revitalization resolution from the General Assembly, which gives sort of a clear normative framework on how the process should go. And it's the letter, as you said, that is going to be signed by the President of the General Assembly and the Security Council that should invite the nominations of candidates. Already the Russian Federation started work on this in their presidency in October. We commit to being constructive and try to really fulfill the commitments and wishes of the General Assembly to conclude the process as early as possible. And we work with the members of the Council to do so. So if we're able to do so within our month, we'll be grateful to send the letter. And yes, I think it will be a crowning glory if we do it on or before the 14th. But there is one expert meeting that has been convened by the Russian Federation during the course of this first week. So we hope that we'll work towards concluding this process as early as possible and get candidates nominated as agreed by the membership in the revitalization resolution.
Ambassador, we'll take the gentleman in the third row and come to the second, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Volodymyr Ilchenko, National News Agency of Ukraine, Ukrinform. Russia, as we see, continues to the colonial war against Ukraine, targeting the civilian population. What is your position as a member of the Security Council regarding the immediate ceasefire, which Moscow continues to reject? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can only answer that in my national capacity. In terms of the Council adopted one resolution on this in which they encouraged the parties to move towards negotiations, which I would think include a cessation of hostility and a ceasefire. In my national capacity, I think we've called for a ceasefire from day one, and we've been very clear on the principal aspect of this issue, and we will only continue to do so. There are various aspects: ceasefire, cessation of hostility, respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within the internationally recognized borders. So I think there's clarity on what we think on this issue, including an immediate ceasefire. And so what we will do is to continue to encourage the parties to negotiate and get to dialogue, because I think that's very significant even to reach a ceasefire. There have been good examples of where diplomacy can work, including exchange of prisoners. Once they had the Black Sea Grain Agreement, so I think there are really examples that if the parties sit down and negotiate, they could achieve outcomes that we want to see, which is a ceasefire and the end of the war.
Thank you, Ambassador. We'll take the lady in the second row, and then we'll move backward. Yes, please. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Evelyn Leopold, Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists and Common Dreams website. You have the Finnish workshop 6th, 7th, and 8th. Is that in this building, or you're going somewhere else for it? And I have another question on, I haven't quite grasped, is Ukraine going to be discussed at all in the Council during your mission? And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Two very important questions. So the Finnish workshop will take place in Green Tree, and it's on the 6th and 7th. So it will be off the UN campus, as it were. In terms of Ukraine meeting, it is not mandated for the month of November, so it's not on the program of work that was adopted, but certainly in the breakfast meeting this morning, some members of the Council have already indicated that they would request for a Ukraine meeting, and based on practice, it means that if there is a request, then we'll have 2 meetings on Ukraine.
We'll take the lady in the front and then go backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Fasulo, NPR, here at the UN. I have a question about Myanmar, and if you expect that there'll be any discussions or, about anything, or has anyone expressed any real interest in addressing it this month?
Well, thank you. I think very good that you asked about Myanmar. It's not mandated, and no member state mentioned Myanmar in their discussions.
Thank you, Ambassador Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York, Ital Press. I see on the 5th, like you mentioned, there is a day dedicated to Sudan. Now, would you agree with the statement that Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in this moment in the world? Would you agree with that?
In my personal capacity, most certainly.
I would prefer as a president of the Security Council, but whatever you prefer.
I will need to consult with my colleagues on that.
Okay, so my question is, last week, actually, the Security Council acted with press statement. And we know the press statement is a kind of law low statement compared to what the Security Council can do. So my question is, as a African country, president of the Security Council, would you try to upscale the response of the Security Council and apply the so-called responsibility to protect that looks like in the last years it disappeared from this institution? And then I have another question.
Thank you. I think that's a very important set of questions that you have. Firstly, on characterization of product. And I think each product becomes useful depending on the situation. There are times where you need the council to speak out as early as possible and press statements and allow you to do so before you negotiate a resolution, which would have meant that time would have passed. So it was important for the council to put out a view on development in Sudan, particularly El Fasher at the time. And then to say we already have 2 resolutions on Sudan in which the council have asked for specifically, firstly, even the issue on the siege on El Fasher that was not respected. So there's a question of implementation. And you're right to an extent that we have to be working on the issue of how do we implement council's resolution and product. That's another issue in terms of the willingness of the parties to come to a cessation of hostilities, to negotiate, and of course have a ceasefire. In a more national capacity, the issue of responsibility to protect is for us a principle which we support, but I don't think not every member of the council is looking at the issue from the same point of view, and certainly R2P has to be discussed in a context, particularly in Africa, and its consequences since it was utilized in a particular situation. What I should say, though, is that there's need for action to end the atrocities in Sudan, and this calls for accountability. And I think there are tools within the toolbox of the Security Council to ensure that there is accountability and we put an end to the atrocities. In the breakfast, the penholder, the UK, has indicated that they will be engaging with council members to find additional ways in which the council can act on what is really a horrendous situation in Sudan at the moment.
Yes. Well, you know, as Africa, I have another question, but just sorry, a personal comment. Because you represent an African country, I personally expect that as a president of the Security Council, you know, you act and you show that the Security Council should act differently. Then if the resolution will pass or not, doesn't matter, but at least show that, you know, they are not doing their job. But I have another question on Nigeria. This is something that's these hours happening. President Trump, the U.S. president, said that he's telling to his army, to his military, to be ready to intervene in Nigeria. So did you have in the last hours, you or your government, any contact with either or both U.S. government or Nigerian government about this issue that could be that all of a sudden your presidency has to take care of?
Thank you. Since the question was directed to me in the context of being an African member, so I think I can only answer it in a national capacity, and specifically on Sudan. What I said at the beginning is that our priority was to get to the issue of agenda setting that is focused on Africa, that we have to focus on African files from an African leadership perspective in resolving African issues. And this is what we have done. When the parties agreed to protection of civilians, right, that was brought to the council, UK and Sierra Leone, we tabled a resolution on POC that was vetoed. So we took responsibility and we worked on a resolution which we thought could have really protected civilians in Sudan. That was vetoed. We've been supportive of the work of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, in Sudan. In fact, we've said when it comes to the issue of Darfur, the referral to the ICC is still effective and valid in terms of the geographical scope as well as the temporal scope. So we believe the ICC still has jurisdiction to deal with the atrocities in Darfur. But of course, we've seen that the atrocities really do go beyond Darfur. And thirdly, we believe that the important step of the ICC convicting al-Abdurrahman is to show that there will be accountability. Took long, 20 years, but of course there is accountability. So the questions that we now have to grapple with as a council is, what do we do, firstly, with this jurisdiction of ICC that is limited in terms of geographical scope in Sudan? Could this be expanded? We have our views on accountability. We believe it should be expanded because definitely it is one of the tools in which we can end the atrocities. We've seen changes in Sudan since we entered in the council in terms of having a civilian government and, of course, the changes that have taken place. Those also should be followed in terms of the political engagement. However, on the issue of atrocities, there has to be accountability. And the International Criminal Court is one effective tool. When you had the briefing from the UN fact-finding mission, they proposed that, as well as a Sudanese initiative on reparations committee that should be established. I think those should be pursued simultaneously.
Thank you, Ambassador. So we'll take the gentleman in the fourth and then the second gentleman in the fourth.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, Ambassador. It's Ephraim Kusaifi from Arab News Daily. Also on Sudan, it's been almost 3 years since that war began, and each time we ask officials here, whether it's the Secretary General, the political department, or even various missions, whether African missions or European missions or American missions, the criticism has been that there have been many approaches to diplomacy there and to trying to achieve peace through talks. You have the IGAD, the AU, the Quads, so many other entities now and then. And it's been 3 years we've been hearing this criticism, but little effort to streamline these approaches. Do you think this renewed interest in Sudan because of the genocide in Al-Fashir is a good opportunity now to maybe take this approach and bring it to a new level? And what would be your suggestion to streamline, to unify the efforts towards solution in Sudan? Thank you.
Thank you. As President of the Council, I think I should say that in addition to the meeting in October, there's been a renewed effort to deal with the situation in Sudan. Before now, there have been various suggestions of how to deal with the issue, including possible visit. And the Council have received briefings repeatedly from personal envoy of the Secretary General, Lamtana Lamamra. So we have those efforts ongoing, and of course, they've not led to what we were all expecting: a cessation of the hostilities, a ceasefire, and then you work on a political process. Now, I think I could also say this in that capacity as president, because one of the things which Personal Envoy Lamamra had worked on was to have a consolidation of the mediation processes. Of course, there's the principle of subsidiarity in Africa, where there is a conflict situation. The regional economic communities, the region, the African Union, the ones who are closest will be best placed to help to solve the problem. And where we have a multiplicity of mediators, one effort which was undertaken was to have a consolidation, and they had this retreat in Djibouti. In a national capacity, what I will say from our experience all these years long ago is that for you to really have peace, the parties really have to take ownership, be ready to dialogue. And that's our experience. And the hope is that the leaders of both sides will be in a position where they have to come to a position where they want to resolve the conflict for the people of Sudan.
Okay, thank you. One quick one also on the selection process for the Secretary General. Your American counterpart has expressed openness to the idea that candidates should be applying from all different regions of the world, and that the Security Council should not stick to rotation, geographical rotation. And I wonder if you had any opinion about that. Do you see eye to eye with this approach to the process, or do you think it is valuable to stick to the geographical rotation? Thank you.
I think all 15 council members express views one way or the other on the selection process. Those should be taken on board, and the council is presently negotiating the response that will form the letter to be signed by the President of the General Assembly and the President of the Security Council. So I will leave it to issue which is under negotiations and will not comment on it further, just to say that all 15 members have expressed views, so all of those are shaping the negotiations.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador. This is Ahmed Ali with Sphinx News TV. Ambassador, just to follow up on the question raised by my colleague regarding the stabilization force in Gaza, you mentioned that the meeting on the 24th will be important and that you are prepared to discuss a stabilization force in Gaza if it is requested by member states. Today, for example, we saw countries meet in Istanbul where Turkey's foreign minister stated they are waiting for the Security Council to define such a mandate. So could you clarify whether this means any member state has already requested a meeting to adopt a mandate for such a force? And a second question, if I may, in your national capacity, I know you mentioned as well to my colleague the need for Palestinians to be a part of a comprehensive plan for their own self-determination. So with that in mind, could you clarify Sierra Leone's position on what a stabilization force in Gaza should look like? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very important questions on the first capacity as President of the Council. We express our readiness to work with any member states that would put forward a resolution and stabilization force, and we were also informed of the meeting of the the group of 8 in Istanbul. So we'll wait the process and be responsive to whatever that is submitted. On the second point, in national capacity, I think, of course, I will not go into the details now, but what will be important is to ensure that the Council is able to give its blessing to a force that will address the situation, whether it's peace enforcement or peacekeeping. The parties should be in a position to let the Council know what would work best in the Gaza context.
Master, we'll take the lady in the 6th row.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Dulcie Leinbach from Pass Blue. I wanted to go back to the letter that the Security Council is meant to write with the PGA's office for the selection process. What are the issues that are holding up this letter? Because Russia had intended to get it out as soon as possible. Obviously, it didn't work. So are you still discussing the methods of voting for the candidates, straw polls versus resolutions? And is there an actual start date that has been agreed on when candidates can say, I'm running, and the process begins? And has the Security Council agreed on methods of getting to know the candidates, either formally or informally? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think the principal function of that letter is to invite the nomination of candidates. In terms of what it is that we should see in the process, I think the revitalization resolution of the General Assembly is quite clear, and I do not expect to see practice of the Council in the letter, because that's not where you expect it. So I think the Council is just negotiating in the normal process a very important letter, and views have been received, and there's going to be an expert level engagement this week. So as I said, the most important factor now is to really ensure that we were able to meet the aspirations of the Assembly to put out a letter as early as possible.
Master, we'll take the lady on the other end of this experience. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Brittany Somerset, and I write for Global Cannabis Times. In the early 2020s in Sierra Leone, a synthetic cannabinoid drug called Kush, which is not to be mistaken for genuine cannabis cultivars with the same name, emerged in Sierra Leone. Simultaneously, Sierra Leone's Minister of Health and Sanitation noticed that policies should change and that there may be a future in which cannabis cultivation and sales are accessible to members of the public. Has the government of Sierra Leone considered legalizing medical cannabis, and do you think in doing so, would that cause a decline in Kush abuse?
Thank you. Certainly not at least in the way you've asked it, not a question for the President of the Council and not a Security Council matter, but it's an important matter when you look at the future. And what I would say is that, including quite recently, the government of Sierra Leone and His Excellency is taking a very strong position on how to address drug abuse. And looking at your specific question on legalization, that should be a national owned process. And I've not observed any movement towards that nationally, and I think that is something which should be respected. It has to be homegrown for such issues that are very important to the health, mental well-being of a state be left to the citizens of the state to determine. Thank you.
Ambassador will take from the very end, please, at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Eric Peters with Kyoto News. It seems possible that the U.S. will ask for new designations on North Korean ships accused of exporting iron to China. What is your national position on this?
Thank you. I just wanted to check that we would have consultations on the 17-18 committee on the 25th, and I think therein views will be expressed. It's on the program of work. On the specific issue of views on designation, we've not seen any presentation. I'll check my PC. So it's difficult to form a view when you've not seen a submission of any proposal at this point in time.
Time for 2 more questions, so we'll take one from the judge.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, I have asked this question to the presidents of the Security Council throughout the months. Would you be willing to invite members of the Security Council to go on a field trip and see Gaza for yourself, similar to different trips that the Security Council had taken throughout the years to conflict zone like Myanmar, like Addis Ababa? You just came back from Addis Ababa, DRC, etc. Thank you.
I think it's a very important question. Whenever the Security Council is in a position to undertake field visits, it should. If all of the element and situation is right, including security implications. Whether that will be the case for the month of November, it's yet to be seen. And of course, you also have to prepare for visits. You must have heard that there are interest in other visits. So the idea that the council should visit is one that we are very supportive of, because it is important for council members to have knowledge of the situation on the ground. In a national capacity, in a different context, for example, Chair of 1533 Committee, we visited at the time when the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo was in a difficult position, and we understood then what was transpiring, and I believe it will be the same situation for other contexts. If the council can be in a position to do so, I think it should always do so.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador. I believe that was our last question. Thank you again, Ambassador Kanu. I thank the United Nations Correspondents Association and all reporters who attended this press briefing, and also for your critical issues that you have raised. Again, thank you very much.